Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Artbeat. I'm your host, Shane Dixon. Today we're excited to have Michael Rohd, Professor of Theater at Arizona State University. Thank you for joining us, Professor Rohd.
It's a pleasure to be on Artbeat, Shane.
Yeah. All right. Now, in 2016, you produced an event on the day of the American presidential election called The Race.
Yes.
That combined many different forms of art. And as I understand it, the purpose of the event was not to support one candidate or the other, but to give people a space to discuss important issues affecting American society and what we want in a leader. How did it go?
It went great. It was basically an 8-hour event. We sort of described it as a performance, community, town hall marathon. And I think starting at 2 p.m. That day, Election Day, we turned on CNN on a giant screen in the theater, and every 30 minutes there was a different performance from a community group around Arizona. Sometimes it would be a performance, sometimes it would be a speech, sometimes it would be people reading editorials, and then at 6:30 p.m., a show that I'd been working on with a group of students and visiting artists, which was about an hour long, happened in the space. We had like 700-800 people come through the theater during the day. They would sort of come in, they would watch something, they would go, and what we were trying to do was make a space for a conversation as opposed to people just sort of sitting at home watching returns alone, because it's a very intense day. That particular day, as or more intense than, many others. So we think it went pretty great, and we heard from folks afterwards that they were really glad to have a space to be in where they could be in conversations that felt really civil and really respectful, but also sometimes challenging and provocative.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you for providing that information and that opportunity for people to do that. Now, you were once quoted as saying, "There is no such thing as art that is not political."
That's right.
What do you mean by that, and why do you think that's true?
Because theater is my particular discipline. I'll start with that as an example. So if I choose a play that has nothing to do with politics, I've still chosen what story to tell. And really the history of politics is told through what stories we tell about history. So if I choose to put a story on stage, I have immediately made a choice about what is important to be talking about at this moment in time.
Very true.
I've also made a choice about who can access that event. What if the tickets are $50? That's political because a lot of people can't get in the room. So I've just got a bunch of people who can afford $50 tickets sitting in the theater watching a play that I've chosen for them to see. So all of a sudden, a large portion of our community is actually not even able to be in the space. That's political. So what I choose to present, how I present it, where I present it, what I charge for it, who's in the room, all those are political choices.
Wow. At each stage, then, you have a political decision to make.
You do. You do, I think. And you also then have a decision to make about, kind of as an artist, what's your intention or purpose? Who are you making the work for? You can't just say, I really love this play, I'm going to put it on and people will come. You can say that. Many people say that. But if you say that, you're basically foregoing any responsibility to the political nature of your act, and therefore it's got a political nature whether you intended it or not.
Right. Okay. So regardless of intention, politics is in there.
Yeah, and it's not like Democrat, Republican politics. It's literally the politics of how power plays out in our communities. Who has it, who uses it, who's impacted by it, who does have a voice, who doesn't have a space for their voice. When you are in charge of a stage or a concert hall or a gallery, you have an absolute connection to those choices and how that lands where you live.
Oh, that's fascinating. Those are thoughts that I haven't quite had before, so thank you for that.
That's what Artbeat is about, Shane. New thoughts.
Now, American politics have become quite polarized and, let's say, acrimonious.
I think that's fair.
The last couple of years. Do you think it's possible for art to create empathy among groups that feel they have no common ground?
Well, this is a very interesting question, and I spend a lot of energy on it. I think that another way to ask the question is, and it's a good question, another way I think about it is, where are there spaces for empathy in public life in America today? And I think those spaces, particularly when you look across ideological divides, are exceedingly rare. They're not generally in the media. They're not generally in our communities or neighborhoods because we all kind of silo ourselves basically on the internet as well as in who we hang out with, and who agrees with us. That's a lot of our lives. I think one of the reasons holiday meals are often so uncomfortable these days for many, many families is it's the only time a lot of us are with people who might believe things very different from us and kind of trapped there
and
for a
within
period
our
of time.
Families
within
as well.
our own families. So I think art is one of many ways we could encourage each other to sort of develop empathy for other stories and perspectives. But the truth is, I don't think art can do that alone. I think there's an incredible need right now for all of us to be listening a little more deeply to those we agree with and don't agree with, but also to sort of try to be present with a little more bravery at times with those who we may not agree with or don't agree with. And it's really hard. And again, I think art is a beautiful space where that can happen. Theater is a beautiful space where that can happen. But if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, I think the responsibility of art is to make spaces for dialogue. And I believe that to a degree now, but we're also at a point where the acrimony is so bitter and so intense that I think art also has a responsibility to be a resistance place, to be an advocacy place, to be an education place. So I wouldn't put on art just the task of creating spaces for empathy, but I'd say it is one of many things that can be used that way with folks who want to be invited into a space of empathy. You can't force people through art to be empathetic.
Very well put. Okay, thank you. Professor Rohd, how do you think the relentless stream of information that we have access to through social media and the internet affects our ability to think?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it affects it massively. I wrote an article a few years ago called "The Artist is the New Data Scientist." Basically, the idea being that one of the most important jobs of the future that have been defined in Forbes and Fortune, all that stuff, is we need people who are able to help us move through the incredible array of material that's coming at us all the time. Material we choose to be inundated with and material we don't choose to be inundated with. So the data scientists historically have been responsible for getting statistics, for making statistics accessible that help us understand how to find what we need. But what they haven't always done is tell stories about those statistics or that data. So I actually think the future for artists in a lot of spaces is synthesizing that massive data, finding ways to communicate it, and finding ways to help people build bridges to the content that's most meaningful to them. So I think it makes us, it puts us in a fog a lot of the time. It makes meditation more necessary. It makes turning off your devices more necessary, this inundation. But at the same time, it presents a really interesting opportunity for artists and designers and culture makers because we are needed as storytellers and connectors more than ever before.
Oh, that's a fascinating idea that an artist looks at all the data around him or her and is able to say something clear and that speaks to people.
Which is the job of the artist. You just described how many people would say that's my role as an artist.
I can see why that role will continue to grow in the future with this massive amount of information. Thank you for that answer. Professor Rohd, when we look back at this time in American history, 50 years from now, what images do you think will epitomize the era?
With your permission, I'll do about 3 maybe, but I'll go global a little bit. The first one that I think of is time-lapse video work being done in China, looking at the pace at which cities are rising, the construction.
Yes.
I think it really speaks to sort of demographic change, urban growth, and just how we're building on planet Earth right now. So I really think those will be an era-defining piece of art. Coming closer to home, I think about the artwork being made around climate change and natural catastrophes, hurricanes, monsoons, landmass changing as a result of rising heat. So I think that art is going to be a very significant reminder of this moment. And then the third thing from this era I think of is certainly the Barack Obama 2008 Hope poster that Shepard Farley did, which I think really looks at the early 2000s and talks about a political moment in this country. And I have to say, I think that the Trump image or art that will sort of be iconic over time maybe hasn't happened yet. Lots of words, lots of images, but nothing with the staying power, I think, of that kind
particular
of... Yeah, so I'm
image.
interested to see what that will be.
Well, very good. Thank you for going global and then more local. I think that was a great answer. You know, we've run out of time, but I'm so grateful to have Professor Rohd here with us, Professor of Theater at Arizona State University, and for all of us here at ArtBeat, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shane. Thank you, ArtBeat.